so. Thanks, Alan, for that very interesting presentation. We'll welcome everyone to the Healthcare 2022 panel. Today, we're fortunate to have a distinguished panel of executives who will be discussing key investment opportunities in healthcare, which include pharmaceuticals, biotech, medical device, digital and virtual care, as well as even new care delivery models. Now that we're experiencing as a society this graying tsunami where the population across the globe in industrialized nations is aging at an unprecedented rate, and coming out of the COVID-19 pandemic, which brought healthcare concerns front and center, family offices obviously make for natural investors in this space, as they're oftentimes emotionally connected to particular diseases or health conditions that have affected their families. And the sector presents very attractive investment opportunities. When we look at how bad the S&P 500 has been slammed, except maybe till the past couple of days, healthcare has dropped, about 50% of what the S&P 500 has. And even during the time of the pandemic and the lockdowns, healthcare stocks continue to perform well, earnings continue to grow, and so there really is tremendous opportunities in healthcare. My name is Brian Meshkin, and I'm the managing partner of Profound Ventures, which is a social impact investment group based in Orange County, California. And I'm also the principal with a growth consulting firm called Stratus Advisors. My background is as a social entrepreneur who has built some of the fastest growing health technology companies in North America, ranked on the Inc. 500 and the Deloitte Technology Fast 500. I consider myself a rocket ship builder of mission-driven companies, and I'm honored to be moderating today's panel of distinguished guests. I'd like to give each of the panelists a few minutes to introduce themselves and talk a little bit about their companies, and then we'll have some group discussion. Let's start with Mark November from Venture Starters, then Terence McGovern from Kato Pharmaceuticals, and then finally Josh McClure from Maxwell Biosciences. Mark.
Thank you, Brian. I also once hailed from Orange County, so that was nice to hear that that's
Great.
where I'm from. I'm in Los Angeles now. So my background, family office, and we have been investing, especially in the last 3 years, in life science companies. I don't want to pretend to be an expert other than I'm focused on impact investing. Beyond life science, I'm also investing in carbon capture, air pollution, water technologies, satellite technologies. I'm mostly attracted to really big ideas. And in the last 3 years, my wife and I decided to focus more on startups and early stage companies to invest our own money in. And then because of the popularity of Zoom and the way we all sort of shifted our models of communication, I started a community called Venture Starters, which essentially is my solution to what to do with all the decks that I'm getting, which I can't invest in. There's too many that I'm getting. It's like up to 40 a week now. So in the summer, I launched a weekly Zoom meeting to introduce my investor friends to a bunch of startups that sent me decks that I thought was interesting. And amazing to me, over 3,000 people registered to attend these weekly events. And Venture Starters has become sort of a phenomenon in its own little way, although I didn't know it was going to become what it is. But essentially, I'm seeing amazing deal flow, 30 to 40 elevator pitches every Wednesday to me and a whole bunch of others, about 100 people that show up live. You can register if you're interested at venturestarters.com. And I've been cherry picking people in companies out of these amazingly talented startups and early stage companies to invest in. Earlier, you had some amazing people talk about the importance of recruiting CEOs to their life science investments. And I could not agree more. Most of the companies that I find, I end up trying to recruit talent to make them, to somewhat de-risk them before I get too involved. And I'm finding that the startups and early stage companies are more open to my suggestions than companies that are further along. So I'm enjoying that. I'm currently recruiting a CEO for a company that has, or we believe has, the cure for cancer. Apparently, and I can't verify this because I wasn't the lead in all of this, but apparently a doctor in Kazakhstan who only speaks Kazakh had performed amazing cures of various cancers on over 600 humans over the last 20 years. and a researcher from the National Institute of Health found out, decided to trek out there, decided to get an interpreter, figure out what was going on, and lo and behold, there's something really amazing happening, at least in this community, with the biotanical solution. So he brought it back to the United States, formed a startup, and I was able to see his pitch at one of my venture starter events, and I jumped on it immediately because if there's a chance that it's real, it seems like I should be involved in it. So I'm basically here today. I want to thank Marty, and I'm here today to really learn and listen and see if there's other possibilities of things that I might be able to get involved in. And I'm also here to promote a number of early stage and startup companies that I have stakes in, but I can't personally get them to the finish line, because the interesting thing about life sciences that I've learned over the last 2-3 years is that the amount of money that you need to raise is pretty significant to get to the FDA finish line. And it's usually a big number that requires a number of people to jump in. It's not just one person who can get you to the finish line. I do think that if the startup teams are pitching total strangers for money, what they need to do is bring some people on their team who have family and friends connections and can create warm introductions, because in 2022, the best way to raise money is through warm introductions, not pitching strangers. Despite the fact I have a weekly event where people are pitching total strangers, as I say that. In any event, that's enough on me. Excited to learn more from everybody else.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mark. All right, Terrance, if you give us an introduction.
Ryan, thank you. I guess Marty's taking a break. So my background is I'm a trained scientist, ended up in business school, got into investment banking and healthcare, and then ran a biotech venture fund, identified a very attractive asset, which I joined forces with Fjord Ventures, which is a modified family office. Started out as a outside partners with institutional investors, and then gradually just decided to work with their own funds and close relationships. So we started that company almost 10 years ago with IP that we had purchased literally from Silicon Valley Bank. And they had funded a company which couldn't get through their next round of financing and turned the asset back to Silicon Valley Bank. We knew the drug needed to be, it's a drug for ophthalmology treatments. The patents are going to expire in mid-20s. We knew it needed to be reformulated, and we needed to get better patents. So what we've ended up.
Can you hear me, guys? Is that better? Brian?
Yes, we can hear you.
We can
Fantastic. Okay, great. We're back up. Okay. That was it. Keep on going.
All right, Terrance, please continue.
So we developed a novel therapeutic platform called Resolve ER, which features direct delivery to the retina through intravitreal injection, which does not exist today, with extended release at the vitreoretinal surface. So this patented platform, we just got approval last year, so we have protection out to 2037. And our initial drug load is a small molecule. However, we can also deliver larger proteins, mRNAs, and other interesting therapeutics. So we're now in phase 2 for a disease called vitreomacular traction, which is $1 billion market in the US and Europe. It's it's unmet medical need. There is no treatment for it right now, other than a vitrectomy, which is actually god-awful treatment, and nobody wants the vitrectomy. And then our backup or secondary indication is diabetic retinopathy, which is a massive market, multi-billion There is no effective treatment for diabetic retinopathy. The only ophthalmology is an interesting sector because there are really very few drugs that have been approved. And the lion's share of drugs have anything to do with the retina are dominated by Lucentis and Eylea and an old generic called Avastin. New treatments, as a number of people mentioned, we've got an aging population. We've got massive issues with obesity, diabetes, and a lot of these turn into ophthalmology, vision-related pathologies, which there's very little treatments available. So we are very excited about where we are. We want to get our phase 2 started, and we'll finish our phase 1 for diabetic retinopathy this year as well. I'm looking forward to talking more with you gentlemen, and like to move on.
Wonderful. Thank you for that introduction, Terrance, and telling us about Kato Pharmaceuticals. Josh, tell us your story and about Maxwell Biosciences.
Yeah, great. My background is started off in military intelligence and dropped out of a PhD in information theory to start a commercial real estate big data company. Was bought out by a billionaire, and that was the third company that I had sold. I currently lead the Ingenuitas family office, which is mostly my family, the McClure family. I'm an engineer with over 20 years experience as a CEO. I'm a multi-patent inventor, including broad-spectrum pan-coronavirus, pan-influenza antiviral molecule that I'll tell you about in just a little bit. That's headed to human trials in collaboration with Stanford University, NYU, and some real bleeding-edge medicine at the Baylor College of Medicine. So my background also includes leading engineering teams, mostly in high tech, prior to this, and then I'm also a pioneer in the field of plasma proteomics and biomimetics. I've got a lot of interest in physics, information theory, nanobiology, and also the future, what the future will bring. And really a big fan of biotech. I like this panel a lot. Biotech is famous for doing well in recessions. According to Klaus Schwab, founder of the World Economic Forum, we're in a new exponential revolution. So the fourth revolution, which follows the third one, which was the digital revolution. And that fourth revolution is artificial intelligence, nanotech, and biotechnology. So CRISPR and mRNA are recent realized technologies that have already somewhat plateaued in value. But at Maxwell Biosciences, my company, we've recently completed a successful NIAID-funded animal study with Fauci's team, which proved that our drug candidates are able to prevent the symptoms of COVID. And that is effective against all forms of coronavirus, not just the tested strains of SARS-CoV-2, but we were also able to show high potency against SARS-1 and MERS, as well as coronavirus beta. And then they also started testing against influenza, which is a different department. We're effective against all tested forms of influenza A, same compound, as well as avian flu and bird flu. And we do this is a fundamental breakthrough in technology that was discovered by a Stanford bioengineering professor, as well as collaboration with the Department of Energy. And this new technology is effectively a synthetic immune system. We are a biomimetic that is copying some of the functions in a small molecule form of the peptides of the immune system. So the company is backed by about $35 million in grants and awards from various different governments, government of Japan, South Korea, and the United States, as well as VC-backed equity funding of about 11 million. And then, of course, my family offices and investments. Our strategic lead indication is chronic rhinosinusitis, which suffered about 11% of the population. There are currently no drugs for the treatment of this type of infection. So it's a polymicrobial biofilm infection that includes fungus, bacteria, and is triggered usually by a virus. So one compound we have is able to treat the virus, all forms of bacteria that have ever been cultured out of a human sinus, including drug-resistant, antibiotic-resistant bacteria, and then also the fungus, which is just in the room all the time. So we call this one drug for many bugs. It's the first technology of its kind, and our clarimers, that's what they're called. It's a platform technology, has been tested in animals at over 100 times the therapeutic dose, still caused no toxicity. A lot of those tests were done by Fauci's team at NIAID. They've also been tested at Baylor College of Medicine, Stanford, and NYU. And we've got a strong and growing patent portfolio with plenty of time to commercialize. Somebody here was talking about recruiting teams. So we just recruited the former U.S. head of Shire's R&D. So he is now our chief operating officer and head of R&D. He brought with him 2 senior vice presidents from Shire's R&D team. And we are currently raising about $120 million to take this into the clinic for many different indications. We're doing really well on our schedule and budget for chronic rhinosinusitis, which is a topical indication for the sinuses so that we don't have to go into systemic. It's a first-in-man study. It's a fundamental breakthrough in science and pharmacology. And so we're not going to have to go into the bloodstream. That's really good for the FDA. We already have the small molecule side of the FDA agreeing to regulate our compounds, even though this type of compound has never been seen before. We had to come up with a new team at the FDA to regulate this type of thing. So we'll be in phase 1 human trials early next year. And we're about to submit our IND. It's a very well-timed opportunity. We're raising $20 million right now on a convertible note. And then that'll immediately just merge into the strategic deal that's happening right now, which is going to be about $100 million.
Awesome. Thank you, Josh. I definitely have some more specific questions for each of you as we go through this, but I'd like to throw out a couple group questions. Obviously, we're now entering a recession, and we're talking healthcare, and healthcare has traditionally been a safe place for investors to move in healthcare. And so what are your guys' thoughts with regards to the opportunities as we move into this recession for however long it's going to last, about the opportunities in pharma, biotech, medical devices, care delivery, or others? Why don't we go ahead and just keep going in the same order? Maybe Mark, do you want to give us your thoughts there?
So I just have to say that Terrance and Josh, just, very impressive what you guys are doing. You know way more than I do about this sector. So I don't want to pretend that I'm an expert. I'm just starting to invest in the sector in the last 3-4 years. My sense, though, is it takes a long time to get these amazing innovations to the finish line. That FDA pathway is frustratingly slow. So, my guess is the recession is really just in the history books by the time some of the companies that I'm investing in and the ones that Terrance and Josh are developing, before when they're in revenue, things are going to be completely different than they are now. I'm taking advantage of the lower valuations and the fact that the angel investor market has completely disappeared this year, except for family and friends. And, the pitching total strangers for angel investment is really just not there very much because all of our stock portfolios are down. Google is down, and that is actually pushing the angels to the sidelines. As a result, I think I'm negotiating way better deals to get into these, companies that might be unicorns. And I'm finding this environment to be thrilling and fascinating. And I don't see any downside as somebody who is building a portfolio of companies in this space. I see the potential problems if the recession is severe 5 years from now, that could have an impact. But it seems like when it comes to saving lives, and most of the investments I'm making are in things that are literally going to save somebody's life, that's a priceless, and I'm not quite sure if it's recession proof or not. I'd be curious what Terrance and Josh actually think.
Thanks, Mark. What are your thoughts, Terrance?
Well, this, as everybody's noticed, the stock market in biotech is down about 75%. IPO market doesn't exist. The M&A market there's a little bit of life, but not a lot. I'm familiar with about 100 different name venture capital groups who typically invest tens of millions of dollars, are just sitting on their funds. Most of them have raised billions of dollars in the last few years, having shown very good results, and now they really are just waiting to see what's going to happen. I mean, there's so many issues out there that present just question marks about what's going to happen with the world and the economy. So what, there is still some fantastic new technologies, which are like, is it Mark? Yeah, I think so. Just talked about with home offices. We think that is the massive potential opportunity for their investors. I think the issue that I've always found with home offices are they're not very well organized, and they're more followers than leaders, and they really need more technical expertise to be provided by someone who can put them together in a cohesive fashion so that they feel comfortable about making these investments. And they don't have to make $10 million investments if you can get, if you've got most companies, you really don't get very far with $1 million or so. What we've found is we're taking science out of universities and academic institutions, places like the Cleveland Clinic and Texas Heart, and they've got fantastic science, which is mostly funded by NIH money. And we try to leverage all the grant money that we can get until they're really ready to do first-in-man studies. So we allow the animal studies, which frankly, the FDA requires them, but often they're not that relevant to what the drug is going to do in a human. So the faster you can get into humans, the better, the way you're going to de-risk it. So that's kind of our approach. And then as we can move further on, then we can bring in larger investors. But if there was a way to bring together more family offices and with a level of confidence in the technology assessment, I think that there's a huge opportunity for them in this cycle.
And I think that's a really good point. That's one of the things we've seen at Profound is putting together special purpose vehicles with different folks with the expertise we can bring to the table that may be a little less sophisticated. That's a really good point. Josh, what are your thoughts with regards to this kind of recession climate?
Yeah, I like what Mark and Terrance said a lot. I think cash on hand is really the king now, right? So there's no way to prepare for something like this in the middle of it. You have to have already raised the cash, and you need to have sources of cash as well that you can draw from, not just from internally. Maxwell Biosciences has about 14 months of burn right now, longer if we delay studies and that sort of thing. We also have lots of grants and commitments. We just submitted to the NIH last year for the Future Pandemics program for the Centers of Excellence. So the various different universities. That was the billions of dollars that were allocated out. And we were successful in leading the Stanford University pitch to the NIH, which resulted in a $66 million grant to Stanford. We're leading that under Professor Annalise Barron. So there's 5 teams in that group. So 5 professors leading 5 groups. Our compounds are the only ones right now that have shown any efficacy against SARS-CoV-2, and we're already at the gold standard animal model, which is a Syrian hamsters study that we didn't even have to pay for, Fauci's team. paid for it. So we're doing some pharmacokinetics, pharmacodynamics studies right now to firm that up a little bit. And then Stanford and the NIH program has already said that they're going to pay for the expedited human trials out of that 66 million. So we don't know exactly how much of that we're going to get, but we do plan on being quite greedy on that money. So long story short, cash on hand. If you're going to be looking at startups, avoid big spend. So like right in front of the Series B, where if they haven't raised their Series B but they're already ramping up spend, avoid that like a hot stove. And then also sort of nascent level startups that have already raised some money and hired somebody. They've got some salaries, they've got to burn. So what you want to look for is like pre-incorporation or incorporation, like coming out of a university where you can bring in your own CEO, or you can serve as the CEO yourself until they get stable and they have no burn. So either the entrepreneur is willing to live with their parents or continue their job or something like that. Because I fully expect this recession to be something like 1918 or something like 2008, where you see a multi-year. We're at war, right? We're at war. So I don't know if you saw Putin's speech, but he didn't. He's no longer threatening. He says we are fighting the West, right? And he has mobilized Russia. So just because it hasn't happened in our lifetimes, go back and look at 1918, and he is stuck in a corner right now. He will be executed unless he moves into a wartime footing and pushes out. He has to expand, right? So it's expand or die for him. So we're in a wartime footing. Look for investments in biodefense, chemical defense, radiation defense. Look for hacking type defense and offense plays, because in the COVID era, we're still in the COVID era, but in that initial pandemic era where it was a big emergency, you saw billions of dollars allocated to pharmaceutical companies, right? You're going to see the same thing happen with defense contractors now, billions of dollars going to defense contractors.
Yeah, good points, Josh. All right, so I've got a couple off-script kind of questions I just want to ask. So with regards to Mark, what you're seeing, when you look at some of these more earlier stage companies, Josh was just kind of talking about some of their like early stage startup environment. In this post-COVID world, obviously, we're seeing people move more to these type of interactions in healthcare, other virtual type of interactions, the role of devices, remote monitoring, that eons old idea that we group sick people together in a medic tent on a battlefield or in a sick waiting room in a doctor's office. I think most people, when they're sick now, don't want to be around other sick people. Or their loved ones. What are you seeing with some of the trends in some of the early stage companies that you're seeing in venture starters? What are some of the things that excite you?
A good question. I mean, there's so many of them. I'm blown away by the inventiveness of the world. I am getting people from all over the world that are part of the venture starters community now, but I'd say 90% are still US and Canadian. There's a lot of solutions out there. I'm personally working with a solution for air pollution and carbon capture. And I think we actually are gonna, I think we might solve it, because our third-party independent testing is gone so well that now ExxonMobil wants to take it in their lab and look at it, and a few of these like household name, huge companies want to take a look at it. Every automobile company's looking at us. I mean, there's technologies that are on the forefront that I think are going to transform the world in a lot of positive ways. My mother died of sepsis, so I invested in a company that is a medical device company that I'm certain is going to solve sepsis. 1 out of 3 people in hospitals that die of these massive inflammation events, and we have a solution to solve that right now. We're in we just completed animal tests. Teromo just did a first rights look deal with us. I mean, we've got a lot of momentum and it's a startup. It's early stage. Our burn rate is very little, by the way, Josh. You have very impressive comments, I have to say. I was like, listen, every word you had to say, I was soaking up there. I just think that every single night when I host an event just for fun and 30 or 40 innovators will come and pitch, by the end of the night, I'm literally amazed at what I just witnessed, because it gives me hope for the future of our planet, because there's so many great ideas out there. The challenge is, and I agree with Josh's assessment, we are at war. I'm nervous about what's going on with Putin, and I do think that there could be an extended period of very negative impacts and outcomes that we need to at least keep in the back of our minds. But finding ways to save people's lives is always going to be in fashion, no matter when it is. It may not result in the revenues and the profits right away, but if the solutions are real and they are meaningful and there's a competitive advantage, especially on cost, to deliver a life-saving treatment of some sort, I think that those ideas, those companies can survive and become enormously successful, which is one of the reasons I've shifted so much of my personal attention into life sciences. I did hold an event a week and a half ago that was only for life science companies and no other companies for venture starters. It went for 2 hours and 40 minutes. I put it up on YouTube. We've had like 2,000 or 3,000 people watch it. I can't believe how many amazing companies there are out there doing great things. And I can't invest in all of them. It's way beyond me. I'm thinking of maybe starting a venture starters fund that's separate from my family office, because there's just too much here and there's a lot of great opportunities to explore. But I'm just one guy, and my wife basically vetoes whatever doesn't feel right to her, and I have and so we're not very sophisticated. So Brian, when you said family offices might need some help to decide what to invest in, that rings true, because I'm going on gut instinct with a background that really came out of Hollywood and consumer products. And then I got into the energy industry, but none of these industries prepared me for life sciences. It's a very challenging industry. So, I'm learning as I go, and I'll be making mistakes as I go. But, I'm looking to find a unicorn in the portfolio or two or more. And I think that's what I'm building right now.
Hey, Brian, can I just jump in for 1 second?
Yeah, go ahead, Marty.
So, hey, Mark, you're in Orange, or are you?
I'm in Los Angeles now. I grew up in Orange County, but yeah.
Yes, and historically, I mean, San Diego has been a lot of great entrepreneurs and not a lot of capital there, and same thing with Orange. So, I mean, there's a lot of great research and healthcare tech coming out of those areas. So, I'm sure LA is a little bit undernourished, also relative to Silicon Valley, which just has so many VCs, and Boston also. I think somebody quoted the other day that 90% of all tech funding is coming out of Silicon Valley and Boston. So I'm not sure what the number is for healthcare, but I'm sure it's not that much different. So
for sure.
Terrance, you guys in Texas and in Southern California probably have more of a green space to run with.
Yeah. So Terrance, with the platform that you guys have with Kato and the eye, obviously the eye is not just an ophthalmology application, but is the window to the soul and so many aspects of health. Where do you see the opportunities there with your guys' platform, and in this climate? What type of opportunities are you guys looking at? Because obviously it's a very unique platform.
Well, the most exciting areas in ophthalmology and generally in biotech are related to cell therapy and gene therapy, and they're getting advanced with AI. So they're reducing the time spent to actually produce a new therapy, and then they're able to de-risk it by doing some testing through AI. And the biggest issue is always toxicology, pharmacology, pharmacokinetics, as Josh was talking about. And in order to get through the FDA, you really have to figure out how to expedite that process. So what with us, we're looking at, the eye is a very complex organ. We can deliver numerous drugs which right now cannot get to the retina properly. And there's a dozen different methodologies that are out there that are trying to deliver it either suprachoroid or some other kind of encapsulation technology, none of which is that elegant. But if you can get a very effective drug to the retina without doing any damage, that's the magic. And that will really create a massive benefit to mankind. You know, most of these diseases ultimately result in blindness, and they're progressive. You know, the obesity epidemic is accelerating. So many pathologies right now that used to take 15, 20 years, now that's 5 to 10. And, you know, our hospitals are going to be just deluged with very serious, you know, people with pathologies. We're really not spending any time on systemic drugs for a lot of the reason that we just haven't done a lot of studying on those. And then they require massive tox studies once again. But I'm pretty excited about cell and gene therapy. We went through this cycle 10, 15 years ago, and they had some incidences of very serious side effects and deaths. And then they were considered to be curse words for a long time, until they've been able to come back out with some safer types of delivery mechanisms and drugs, which, you know, like CRISPR and some other gene editing products really are going to make massive inroads into therapeutics.
Thanks, Terrance. Now, Josh, I was really intrigued by what you were talking about the application of a small molecule and you guys getting the FDA to be able to have such a broad application. I mean, obviously, after September 11th, when some crazy people flew airplanes into buildings, we didn't have a war on airplanes flying in the buildings. We had a war on terrorism. And we are just coming out of this pandemic with regards to COVID-19, but I anticipate that there's likely going to be a war on infectious disease that's likely going to happen. And I would think that your company may be very uniquely positioned with the platform and this delivery mechanism to do some pretty exciting things. What are you looking at on the horizon with regards to what the implication is for what you can do dealing with the symptomology of these infectious diseases that are very, very transmissible?
Yeah, it's that's happening now. And remember what I said about the fourth revolution. This is triggering the fourth revolution. This is triggering the biotech and nanotech portion of the fourth revolution, as well as AI within pharmacology, right? So AI and machine learning, you have to have enough data in order to feed that. It's not a magic genie, right? You have to be able to feed the machine. That's my background is in big data. Remember, I was in commercial real estate big data and used a computational database in order to discover the small molecule that we're working on. And we have a platform, it's called the Claremore platform, that is able to mimic the functions of peptides. So peptides have side chains associated with them. So peptides kind of look like dreadlocks, so like a reggae man's hair. They're kind of like got little curly cues that are coming off of a backbone, right? And so with small molecules, you're not able to mimic that whole big hairdo, the whole big thing, right? And so what you have to do is you have to get functional correlation to the structure, right? So structure function correlation, and then once you have that, then you can take a finger, one small little piece of that, and say, okay, that is a key. So if you think of that, I was using the hairdo metaphor before. Think of that as a key ring, right? And so proteins use each one of those side chains to do different things. So you create essentially a floppy small molecule, and then that is able to fold, and then you're using that as one key, and it fits a certain lock, right? So it's only for very well-studied peptides that we're able to do this, but we now have a high throughput array that is able to mimic almost any peptide in the human body as long as there's enough data about it. So, and we've got some of the biggest names and biggest brains in the industry working on this, from Fauci's team at NIAID all the way to Stanford bioengineering department. NYU is bringing in a bunch of money for us as well. And then we also have the Japanese CDC that's contributing research and funding. Government of Australia just funded us for $5 billion for surface attached compounds to attach the compounds to a surface like a contact lens to make the contact lens non-infective. And so this is at the nano level. It's below the wavelength of light, these molecules, so they don't get in the way of the light that's coming through the contact lens. And so we're right now defending a patent for a anti-HIV, anti-herpes spermicidal condom and personal lubricant because these compounds are highly antiviral, actually virucidal. They actually eliminate the virus, destroy the structure of the virus. And we have that photographed using electron microscopy. You can actually see it in stages where the virus actually blows up.
Oh, that's really exciting. I know we're approaching the end of the time there. We didn't even get to touch on new virtual care delivery models, home care delivery models, advances in medical devices with brain-computer interfaces. There's so much that's happening in healthcare, but I'd like to thank everyone for their participation today and for sharing their insights about healthcare in 2022 and beyond. For those who are in attendance who would like to speak with anyone on this panel further, we invite you to reach out to us. We'd love to speak with you further. In closing, I'd like for each of you maybe to encapsulate in one thought, just one closing thought to leave with the attendees about healthcare now and into the future. And let's go backwards. Josh, you go first.
Sure. One parting thought is cash is king. Look for investments that don't have high burn rates, but have really compelling stories where the rubber meets the road already. They don't have to assemble the car. There's already rubber on the road, and they can get non-dilutive funds. So they're not out looking for investment. They have some sort of non-dilute, whether that's revenue, they're already hitting revenue numbers, right? And they can then bootstrap themselves that way, or within pharmaceuticals, you can't really bootstrap, right? So the way you do that is, are they in a sweet spot for the U.S. government and other big money funding? So for instance, like BARDA, CARB-X, and NIH, National Science Foundation, et cetera. DARPA is going to be a really big one. There's going to be billions of dollars going to DARPA now, especially for chemical, radiation, and biodefense. And we just brought in Major General Barb Holcomb, who's the former commander of Fort Detrick and the entire Department of Defense, Biodefense. She's going to be joining us. She's already a consultant. She'll be heading up what we call Project Anubis. We'll be focusing on synthetic immune system for all of those, radiation, chemical, as well as biodefense.
Great. Thank you, Josh. Terrance, a closing thought.
Key thing that we've done is, you hear about virtual companies. Well, that's what you need that to do. Most of us do not need full-time staff for a lot of positions. And so you just kind of rent them or use outside consultants, and also leverage technology, make friends with all the potential strategic partners very early on in the process. They're very, I found them to be very friendly and helpful. And so they can keep you from going down, a wrong road. And also they're great to have working with you over time, and they could be the ultimate partners. So I found that to be the way to go.
Great. Thanks, Terrance. And Mark, a concluding thought.
First, Marty, thank you for inviting me. I really appreciate it. And I am seeing companies that are not nearly as fascinating as Terrance's company and Josh's companies. I'm seeing them much earlier, like when they are literally just getting started. And if any of the attendees would like to see companies that are just starting to raise money, learning to raise money, might even be changing CEOs at that early stage. I have tons of them that need help, and I can't help them all. Happy to make key introductions. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Mark, and thanks to everyone on the panel. And for those family offices that are looking for some specialized expertise in the field, we regularly consult with NIH. They always joke that the companies that they're funding that are growing are contracted with us at Profound Ventures and Stratus Advisors. Would be happy to help. Marty, thanks so much for organizing it. And